So the big question is this. We know spontaneous remissions and so-called miracle cures exist. After all, I'm living proof of this, having cured my quote-unquote incurable illness. There's something to how this happens. So how do we, as humans with chronic symptoms, tap into this so-called miraculous healing capacity? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Dr. Erin Hayford, and welcome to the Sacred Illness Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just my standard medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. I'm very excited today. I have Claire Hickson with me from the UK. She's another person that I met through Lizzie. So if you guys remember Lizzie from a few episodes ago, this is now my second connection via Lizzie that I'm having on the podcast. So I'm very grateful for this community. Claire and I were chatting how there's these ripple effects that happen when you start to get into this work and into this world. You just start to meet like-minded people doing the work, and it just becomes this inspiring network of humans. So Claire, thank you so much for being here today. It's so nice to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Erin, for having me. It's a real honor. I was looking at your podcast, particularly at Lizzie's podcast episode with you, and it's really inspiring, and it really speaks my language and where I'm at the moment with my understanding of healing and illness and the body wanting to talk to us, really. So yeah, it very much speaks to me very deeply, and love the name, Sacred Illness, because it is sacred. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Once you get into this world and get into this journey, we all start speaking the same language because we all start having the same experiences that become undeniable, which at some point is this realization of my illness is sacred. It's a gift. It's here for me, and it's guiding me in a certain direction versus this thing that's in the way of the life that I want to live. I love that we all sort of arrive at that place, because that's not something you think the second you get a diagnosis. You're not like, oh, it's a sacred gift. That comes with time. So without further ado, I'd love to jump in. And I know you're going to start us in modern day and then walk us back through the journey you've been on. So where are you at now, and where does this story go from here?
Yes. I was going to do this very neat kind of summary almost. I love it when authors do that in books, and you get this snapshot of this is happening right now, and then you go back in time. So I thought I'd try and do that. So where I am now is I have a uterine fibroid. So a uterine fibroid is essentially a tumor, but it's benign and it's within your uterus, and it can position itself in different ways. It can be on the outside of the uterus, it can be on the inside, or it can be within the muscle wall of the uterus, and mine is within the muscle wall. And I'm happy to say, it was measuring 10 by 10 centimeters. So it was very much making itself known. I couldn't not notice that. And in the last 6 years, it has shrunk considerably through a very multi-layered and holistic approach to healing. So instead of surgically removing my womb through hysterectomy, which is what I was being offered, I chose to stay with it and be curious and also do my own research. So I felt like I needed to take my power back and find my inner authority, because everything was outside of me. I was being told lots of different things. So I pulled everything back in, which I'll go into in more detail soon. But essentially, it's led me to understand through a really deep journey of inner work, meditation, my own yoga practice, that essentially the conclusion I've come to very recently, so this is where I am at right now with it, is that the fibroid represents the newborn aspect of myself, and led me to say the sentence quite recently in a session that I am essentially pregnant with myself. That's where I've got to with it. And the beautiful thing about that is that I don't therefore reject myself. I don't reject the newborn aspect of myself. How could I do that? I don't abandon that aspect of myself. I actually call it back in, call it back home, and reintegrate. And the rejection and the abandonment that I'm avoiding now, that I'm saying, my gosh, no, I need to love this part of myself. This is what it's asking of me. The rejection and the abandonment is my story as a newborn. That is the trauma that I experienced, abandonment from my mother. I can go into a little bit of that later on. That's where I'm at with it right now.
As you were saying that, it just made me think of how symptoms in general typically are representative of early childhood developmental things that we are carrying in our body. So in a sense, we are all pregnant with ourselves. Our symptoms are some form of being pregnant with some form of ourselves. We're holding that part of ourselves in our body somewhere. It's an interesting way of thinking about symptoms as being this conglomeration of self, of a younger version of ourselves that has gotten stored in the body and is held in the body because that's what trauma is. It's something we can't process. It's something we didn't know how to move through because we were newborn or 2 or 5. We didn't have the skills and the capacity to work with it. And so it stores up in the body. So where do we go from here? Where does the story begin?
Yeah, so I'll go back in time. And I may be kind of here and there because it's so multi-layered. I might be saying something that's quite medical, and then I'll weave in something else that was happening at the same time. It's only now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, wow. It's kind of like a big jigsaw is how I'm seeing it. And I've been given some really significant pieces to get closer to finishing it, although I don't think we ever finish it, quite frankly. But going back in time, in 2019, so 6 years ago, I found this mass. I'm lying in bed on my back and I'm thinking, this feels strange. It felt significantly, I mean, 10 by 10 centimeters. If you've got a full bladder, that's definitely going to be protruding. And I think I had already sensed it through other things and sort of not really understood what was going on. But there was a moment, and it's, you know, you get these memorable moments, and I can remember feeling it and going, oh, no, that's not right. And I immediately went to the doctor to find out and get a diagnosis. Took me off for a scan. I was very, very nervous. I was dreading the words of, you know, I'm really sorry to say, but XYZ. Thankfully, I got told that this is a fibroid and that it is benign and, you know, lots of options for it, etc. So 2019 was that year of finding out about it, going for these scans, trying to understand what it was. I hadn't actually even heard of one, to be honest. I'd never had any kind of uterine issues before that. To put it into context, I'd had 3 pregnancies, 3 natural births, you know, been really blessed and it was all great. So this was the first thing I was like, whoa, what's this? I've never had a problem around my womb before. So, you know, coming to the end of 2019, the symptoms were getting very, very bad. Some of the symptoms with fibroids can be excessive bleeding, so what they would call flooding, which is really socially very, very difficult to manage. At the time, I was really into like big fitness. So cycling and doing all these cycling challenges and doing HIIT workouts and very, very sort of, you know, yang, masculine, come on, you know, I got to challenge myself. And it really didn't sit with this diagnosis and what was happening to my body. And at the same time, I was starting to become very curious about myself and my inner world, and very, very curious about meditation at the time. So that was kind of happening at the same time. I basically got given the diagnosis and then some very limited options, you know, mainly quite a lot of male doctors saying to me, you just need a hysterectomy. The whole lot needs to come out. That's what happens. It's really big and, you know, there's not a lot of options. And I think you can, with some fibroids, you can just have the fibroids removed and retain the womb. But because mine's in the wall of the womb, it was tricky. So I was lined up for surgery for a hysterectomy in 2020. I was on a waiting list, I think. And then the pandemic happened. So it's kind of like this big sort of in the middle of it all, you know? And that gave me the space that I needed actually to further explore meditation and what was going on with me internally, because I was feeling a lot of stirrings and a lot of kind of, I was seeking meaning. What is the purpose of life and the meaning and all of this. So I was scheduled for the hysterectomy in 2020. The pandemic happened, and I wasn't satisfied with that hysterectomy. I was fearful of it as well. I really genuinely was. I don't want this kind of surgery. I don't want that kind of intervention. I've never had any kind of major operation or medical treatment of any kind. And I would say that I am more inclined towards the least intervention that I can have. I've just always been naturally that way. And with my 3 children, when I was pregnant and gave birth, I just naturally came to this place of like, I know my body and I don't need much intervention and I'd like to be left alone. That's how I was with the birth, even though I was at hospital. So I wasn't that surprised at my reaction that I'm like, I don't want a hysterectomy. There was this deeper instinct of the importance of the womb and not losing it as a physical organ in your body. And so I researched. I decided at the same time as doing all this beautiful, deep inner work and meditation that was going on along at the same time with all that space that we had in the pandemic, I researched about treatment for fibroids, and I found a type of treatment called HIFU, which stands for high intensity focused ultrasound. And because I'm in Oxford in the UK, we're pretty lucky with our hospitals. We have teaching hospitals here. And one of those hospitals actually had a HIFU machine and a team of consultants who were eagerly exploring what they could do with it. So my doctor reached out with me pushing that. I had to really push and say, I want, at the same time as you're scheduling this hysterectomy, please write a letter to these team of people and tell them about me. And I want to know if I can have that. And to my delight, a letter came back saying, quite months afterwards, actually. And funnily enough, the hysterectomy was delayed anyway because of the pandemic. So it was like fate. And in that time, the letter comes back and it says, you are a candidate and we would like to see you. So I had the first round of treatment late 2021. And at the same time, with the inner work journey, I had been working with this amazing teacher that Lizzie will have mentioned as well, Dylan Ayalu. And I was doing guided meditations with him, which he put out at the beginning of the pandemic. And for me, that started to lead me down a really deep journey of getting to know myself better. So it's kind of like the two storylines run alongside each other. So I'm waiting for this HIFU treatment, but at the same time, I'm meditating really deeply. I'm meditating in community. That felt very important as well. I'm not alone here. I've got community, I've got other people who feel like me. And I had a pretty significant creative awakening in the form of soulful spiritual poetry was coming to me, is how I would describe it. And it was like a light bulb went on and the lid flipped off something inside of me, and just all of these words and lyrics and very lyrical poetry came through. And I didn't really have a choice in that. It wasn't something that I tried to do. I'm not, at the time I wouldn't have said I was a poet. I was a good writer, but never poetry. But it just consumed me. And Dylan's community at the time, including Lizzie, witnessed a lot of that and provided a safe container and community for me to not be shy to share it. They were so encouraging, and especially Dylan, who was like, yeah, you've got to share this. This is magical. So he was integral to my journey of saying, come on, let's share this magic that's wanting to express through you. So I learned so much in that amazing community, and it was hundreds of poems. So I would be, not every night, but I was often awake at 3 o'clock in the morning because it would wake me. I would have this kind of like feeling of words, or a title would come in and I would just get up. And I always had to have a notebook near me because it was like a big explosion of poetry. And that led me to publishing a collection of poems, which is on Amazon. It goes through a kind of 7-step journey, if you like, of my feeling of what it is to come home to yourself. So that's a little glimpse of the book, and it's called In Light, and each of the letters represents one of the 7 chapters and different poems in each. So that all happened, which was huge. It was a huge moment in my life, and I would say that was all around voice and expression. And in my younger years, not feeling like I had a voice, not feeling that I could express how I actually was feeling. It was hard to express that, you know. And being so small, you don't really understand what's going on. You don't understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So yeah, the voice feels really significant to me. And I see this connection between the throat and the womb as being very deep. So the more that I've gone through it, the more that I've understood that connection and then honored it. So timeline wise, that book happened around 2022, and I then went on to do yoga teacher training. And again, that decision didn't feel logical. In fact, at the time, I remember saying, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't think I want to be a yoga teacher. This doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, but I just have to keep following the breadcrumbs, following my intuition. And so I did teacher training. I was with Lizzie and many other beautiful souls. And again, we are witnessed very deeply in a container that feels safe, where you're safe to be yourself. You're safe to say, this is who I am, and to start unpacking your story, you know, really learning about story work. It was huge. I went into that not really being attached to the outcome. I went into that wanting to understand myself more and unravel a little bit more of my story. But as it turned out, I did go on to teach. So I am now a yoga instructor, and I've been doing that for 4 years. And it's been an absolute honor, to be honest, to hold space for other people. And it feels very important that I continue to do the inner work myself. I simply wouldn't hold space for other people unless I felt that I'd walked the walk, and that I continue to be on this journey of really understanding myself. And so I had another, I mean, it's kind of weaving. I knew I would do this, kind of skip around a little bit, but I had another round of the HIFU treatment. I was lucky enough for them to say, yes, you can do it again. That's the wonderful thing about HIFU is, unlike other forms, HIFU is kind of a form of laser treatment, but it goes through water. So there's non-invasive, there's no cuts. You're not even under general, you're sedated. And there's no limit on how many times you have it done. Unlike other things like radiotherapy, you can only have it so many times, but HIFU is totally safe. So it's pretty exciting. And I think there's a lot going on with HIFU around certain cancer treatments now as well, which feels pretty incredible. So I had another treatment in 2023, 2 years later, to keep on top of alleviating the symptoms. So I guess in summary, I'll continue with the timeline in a moment just to bring it up to date, but just to put some context around the medical side of things and the more physical healing around the fibroid. I was always told with the HIFU, it's not going to disappear it. It's not going to just get rid of it altogether. What it's going to do is destroy some of the tissue in the actual tumor so that it stops its path of growing, and also then alleviates some of the symptoms like flooding. And I have to say, after that first treatment, all of my symptoms stopped. So even though physically it was still there and I could feel this mass and this lump, I was feeling so much better, and I wasn't feeling anemic and things like that, which had also happened. And then to have it again 2 years later was just sort of maintenance and keeping on top of it. And to be honest, when I went back in for the second treatment, I was feeling really proud of myself because I was thinking, I've done so much work on this. I've done so much emotional work and energetic work. Surely he's going to say that it's shrunk and I'm going to be this miracle case, you know. And I came in and I looked at the scan and it was almost the same size.
Mm.
And I have to say, I felt really gutted in that moment. I was like, oh, gosh, it hasn't worked. But like he said, it has, because your quality of life has been amazing and all of your symptoms have alleviated. And now we're going to do that again. And he said, and I think this time I've worked out a way of getting to more of it. So he was really quite excited about the second round, which was really successful. But I suppose my point is, through the whole journey, I think I've had to really just surrender and say, there isn't one way of doing this. There isn't one black and white end to it. And even the so-called option that a lot of people were saying, oh, you should just do that. You should just have that, the hysterectomy. The implication around that was, oh, just get the hysterectomy and then your whole life will be fine. It'll be done. But I was thinking that wouldn't be the case. I think there'd be many more ramifications from having a hysterectomy. And of course, that doesn't also solve the emotional and the energetic aspect of it. So I think what I really learned was there is no one way to do this, and that everything has nuance. Nothing is just black and white. And that was probably my biggest learning around it. After that treatment in 2023, I began to connect with another yoga teacher, a senior yoga teacher who has herself become qualified in body psychotherapy. I have a huge amount of respect for her and I was very drawn to her work. I went to do a 4-day body psychotherapy course with her. I traveled to her studio, and again, the same sort of feeling like, I'm not sure this makes logical sense, but I do know that I'm meant to go and do this. And I went because I thought, wow, body psychotherapy, learning from the body up, not the mind down. And I think because I knew that talking therapy wouldn't work for me, and I'd only dabbled once or twice in that, and it just didn't seem to do anything for me. But it was also coming from the context of my teaching. And I was like, I want to know more. I want to know more about the muscles. I want to know more about the fascia and the brain and the vagus nerve and all of these amazing things. So I went to do this course. And again, it was a little bit like the pandemic year where there was this pivotal moment that happened just during that 4 days. It was a small, intimate group of people, a mixture of other yoga teachers, counselors, therapists, that kind of audience, all curious to know and go through this process. But it was also with a yoga practice weaved in, because she is a yoga practitioner. So yoga and body psychotherapy weaved together, which has now become my passion. And during those 4 days, when I was given the science around trauma, what that actually means, how it lives in the body, how the body is. And I already knew some of this, but there was some extra science that was given. And on one of the days, the way that they gave the scientific bit, they described a person. And what happened to me was I sat in that room listening to them describe this person and thought, that's me. And it was a real moment, and not an easy moment either. Like my whole nervous system went crazy, heart rate going up, all the symptoms, just sat there going, whoa, as the realization hit me. And what they were describing was that if a child younger than 8 months old goes through a very traumatic event, then it will have a huge impact on their nervous system because they're still in such early development. And it has a major impact on some of the, for instance, some of the supporting muscles in your back could end up being in this kind of collapsed state, because babies have these reflexes that they develop at a young age, and those can be impacted. And So I'm sitting there just listening to this going, whoa, like I know that's going to be me, that will be me. And I was having all these light bulb moments dropping in. And then there was more of a kind of, and this person having experienced something like that would likely go out into the world never feeling safe, never feeling quite enough, and just having this general sense of being a bit damaged at the core.
Mm.
And you could be trying all sorts of things to heal that and feel better, the talking therapy and all sorts of things, and that's not going to work. And so that moment for me last year was huge. And it was, what it led to was me speaking of my experience and being witnessed in that space, which was really humbling, really overwhelming, really scary, really vulnerable, really profound, and led me to understand myself much more deeply and then start to connect the dots. So since then, coming into this year, you know, I was on a pathway with my teaching, my poetry, guiding other people through meditation with weaving in the poetry. And it was all starting to go in this quite nice direction, like, oh, yes, I could be this and I could be that. But I just had to stop because I knew that I needed so much integration after that. I was like, I have to go in again. So, yeah, most of this year, I've just been dedicating to myself and keeping the teaching going, but trying to expand and grow in different ways. I've just been like, there's time, another time. I need space. So I've continued this year. And after that pivotal moment last year, I then continued with private sessions of body psychotherapy for myself. I've been having those for the last year now. And that has been nothing short of incredible. Simple, but profound. And yeah, really life changing. So that kind of brings me up to today and where I'm at now, which is that realization that's been quite recent of, wow, there was this fractured part of myself, the newborn aspect, and other aspects beyond that, of course, because the journey continued. But, you know, for me with the healing, I was like, I really need to go right back to the start. And so that's where I'm at now. I'm with a very young version of myself, is very present for me right now. That's what I'm sitting with. That is what is present. That is what requires love and attention and kindness and compassion and sort of remothering, really. So then I made this full circle moment within a yoga practice. We're encouraged in our yoga practice to just be present with what is. Come into a pose, an asana, and then just give yourself space with the breath, like what's here. And you can have all sorts of different things come up. But I noticed that I was frustrated with my body because we were on an online session and I could see myself in the squares in my little group. And I noticed that I was frustrated with my body and I could hear the inner voice going, oh, look at your tummy. Your tummy's protruding. You look slightly pregnant, blah, 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 because I've always been really self-conscious of it. And then I sat with that and, you know, I shared about that. And I said, actually, I felt like I was saying, you're in my way, like go away. And so I had this real moment of like, no, because that is the aspect of myself that needs to be brought back. It was lost and fractured and kind of homeless. It was just really kind of poignant. And in the weeks afterwards, I went through a lot of grief that was coming up in different ways. Like I could be out on a dog walk and tears would come out of nowhere and I just allowed it, you know, just sit with some of those emotions that would come up. And it would come at times that were, which is grief, it comes at times that you're not expecting it. And just to give myself space and allow those emotions and just hold myself through those emotions and let them move through me, because I could almost feel this sense in myself that, you know, layers were floating up, they were rising up, and each emotion was like, okay, there's a little bit more and I can process it through and allow it Because really all the journey in the fibroid was the invitation. And really all it was saying to me is, I don't feel seen. I feel rejected. I feel abandoned. I feel fractured. I don't feel that I matter. So to catch that moment of saying, I'm pregnant with myself, this newborn baby version of me is sitting in my own womb, that felt beautiful, to be honest. It's kind of everything. I've gone through all these like, oh, it's tragic and it's heartbreaking, but it's beautiful and it's poignant and meaningful. And I feel really, really grateful, to have got to this point. That's sort of where I'm at the moment. It's just like, oh my God, I feel so grateful for this. And I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change my early story either. I wouldn't change what happened when I was born. I just wouldn't.
Hi, Sacred Illness listeners, Dr. Erin here. If you are resonating with the stories and the things that you're hearing inside this podcast, and you're curious how to begin this work yourself, how to start connecting with your illness in this different way, to start seeing it through a different lens, to start being in relationship with it versus seeing it as an adversary or something that you have to fight against, I would love to invite you to join us inside the Sacred Illness community. This is an online space I've created exactly for that. It takes you step by step through a process to decipher the message of your body, to understand what your symptoms are trying to communicate with you, the subconscious patterns and the belief systems that have been imprinted and programmed into your nervous system that are now creating the conditions in your body that are not conducive for healing, and in fact are likely creating the illness and the symptoms that you are experiencing now. Within this community, you will learn all the things you need to do to begin to rewrite those stories, to rewrite those nervous system patterns, to understand on a deeper level what it is that's driving your body to create illness and to move in this direction of disease, and how to reverse this process and begin to work with yourself in this more holistic, loving way versus fighting against a body that you're perceiving perhaps to be failing, when really illness is this beautifully wise communication trying to get you to tune in and listen in this new way. Everything contained within the community is self-paced, it is affordable, it is easily accessible from anywhere. It can be on your laptop or on your phone, and it allows you to add this element that's foundational to your health and healing process in addition to anything else that you're doing. This work is complementary to whether you're taking pharmaceuticals or just pursuing more holistic type treatments. Whatever you are doing, this nervous system, mind-body piece is foundational and needs to be part of your treatment plan. So if it's not, the Sacred Illness community is a really easy and really important way to get this part of the work into your routine. If you want to learn more, you can click the link down below in the show notes. That will lead you to a full description of everything that's included in the community. Or if you're ready to just sign up today, you can go to mysacredillness.com, follow the prompts, and you'll find your way into our space. It is my mission and my goal for everyone who's listening to this podcast to feel a sense of hope that you're not broken, your body is not failing. It is a beautiful, intelligent communication that is taking place, and the Sacred Illness community is the space and the place where you can begin to decipher that message and find your way back to the health and the healing that you deserve and desire. So I hope to see you in there, and for now, let's get back to the podcast.
My hope for all of us is that eventually, as we start to understand that our body is just holding these parts of ourselves that do want to be seen and do want to be loved and do want to feel safe, how could you hate that part of you? How could you reject it? It's always okay to not want the symptom or to hate feeling uncomfortable, or, obviously it's not about enjoying suffering or anything like that, but it's reframing it and understanding, yes, this is uncomfortable, and yes, it's putting a fork in my road, but what a gift that it's giving me at the same time to ultimately understand these deeper layers of myself. I mean, think of all the things that you now are and are doing and have become because of it, right? None of this would exist if you hadn't gotten a fibroid. I mean, we never know, but it's pretty, it sounds like a stark change in direction. And even your poetry, right, is these parts of you that were awakened because of your healing journey. If we can lean into it and be in relationship with it in this different way, we can see that aside from the deep inner healing that takes place, which is a gift in and of itself, there's all these aspects of ourselves that are uncovered as a result of it as well. And what you said at some point in your story, which is so key, is this idea of breadcrumbs and intuition. where it's not just this like, do this and then do this and then do this and then you're good, because that is not honoring our individuality and our uniqueness and the journey that our specific illness and our specific inner wounding wants us to take. There's obviously places where we overlap and crisscross, and there's a general trajectory. It's interesting, your book has these sort of 7 things. I teach a 9-thing framework. It's not like do this, then do this. It's these overarching parts of the journey that you go through, right? But it looks different for everyone. And that idea of breadcrumbs is like, you might dabble over here and take a medication, and then that leads you over to this yoga teacher, and then it teaches you this thing about your inner child, and then you find this surgeon. It can take you in every single direction. And I think it's about staying open-minded. And I loved what you had said at several points in your journey. It was like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I, like, logically, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I doing this? But there was that inner knowing that you were trusting, and it led you exactly where you needed to go. And so there's that need for surrender. Absolutely. Like, there's this need to be like, okay, if I go down the path that everyone is telling me to go down, we know where that goes. Surgery, okay, that's it. Or I can lean into this other journey of the unknown, trusting what doesn't quite make sense, but that feels so intuitively correct in my body. And it takes a lot of guts to do that path, because first of all, it's the unknown, which feels scary, and no one likes things that are not predictable or known. It goes against our wiring. But then on top of that, there's often the well-meaning, usually family members, loved ones, obviously doctors, all the things that are going against us trusting that other path. And so it's no small thing to lean into that other path in general. The pandemic was such an interesting opportunity, so to speak, for so many people. It was just this massive, well, that path is now completely cut off. So what are you going to do? I think it forced us into a lot of honest reckoning with ourselves, or it gave us opportunities to really deeply assess, is that the direction I want to go in? And it sounds like you've always had this sense of trust in your body. Is that fair to say? Or just a connection to yourself, or desire to do things different? What was it about you that led you to want to have more natural childbirths, for example, versus doing the typical, more conventional birthing style?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's quite an interesting kind of paradox in a way, because the traumatized version of myself is the one that would slip into fear and think, oh my gosh, what if this and what if that? When I was a child, I tended to be quite worried about getting ill and quite sort of, what do they call it? Sort of medically anxious. I don't know if there's a term for it, but like always worrying, like, am I ill? Is this going to kill me? Worrying about death as well. I went through a stage when I was younger of being absolutely terrified of dying, and convincing myself that certain symptoms in my body, like my heart beating faster or palpitating, which is basically through anxiety. So it was like a self-perpetuating thing, that I would have this feeling of terror, which I now, very recently, I now know where that feeling of terror came from. It came from the very young version of me, but I couldn't make sense of that at that age. But the traumatized version of me was very scared and had a lot of self-doubt and anxiety. But my true self, underneath that story that was there, I have deep faith in myself. And I really use that word faith with meaning, because I feel like it's a very different word to belief. A belief can be biased, or a belief can be sort of read somewhere or given to you by somebody else. But faith is very, very personal, very deep. And so beyond that storied version of myself, there was this deeper, wiser part of me that just knew. And so I was quite a paradox, because on the one hand, I could be really panicking about something, and on the other, I'm like, I'll be fine. And really kind of when I don't know if I should swear, but when the shit hits the fan, in those kind of situations, I'm like really good and steady. But you'd expect me as an anxious sort of child, and then into my grown-up years, quite anxious about things and worried about getting ill and things. But this other side of me is like, nobody panic, it's going to be fine. And anytime there's been something like a pandemic or my own childbirths, I was steady as a rock, to the point where One of my midwives, I think my second daughter was born, she said that I slightly freaked her out because I was so quiet and calm. She was quite a new midwife, so she was expecting me to be more noisy. But I was very inward and very within myself and sort of deep breathing. And so I didn't teach myself that, but that seems to be something that is natural. Underneath the layers of the story that have affected me, I have deep faith in myself and my body, and I trust my body. So it is an interesting paradox.
That is. And to me, what our intuition is, and this is just my opinion, is our higher self. It's that higher inner knowing that is who we are before life got in the way, like you're saying, and sort of conditions us to have these other ways of showing up in the world. And that inner knowing is always there, that intuition, that inner voice, that guidance is always there. And it's interesting to me how and when it comes through at crucial times when we always have the choice to ignore it. But it sounds like that part of you has been strong enough to where you've leaned into it in these crucial moments. And this healing journey was one of them. And I think it can help when we have experience doing something like childbirth in this radically different way that goes against what we think of what it's supposed to be like. If we can lean in on those moments and really trust ourselves, what else are we capable of? It's almost like there's this unconscious seed planted in these experiences that teaches you, I can lean on that part of me. I can trust that part of me. It comes through for you. And yeah, I think that's part of the work too, is letting that part of us just be us all the time, working to release those other parts of us that are fearful and limiting in their way of being in the world, and understanding why they're there, but recognizing that it's not truly us, de-identifying with those parts of ourselves. And one of the things you had said, and you touched on it, you had said something that blew my mind, was this throat and sacral womb connection. And you had said how even embryologically, the tissue is similar. The tissue that goes on to develop our vocal cords is similar to the tissue that goes on to develop the uterus. How does that strengthen your commitment to expressing your voice or finding your voice through this journey? That feels like such a pivotal part of your experience here.
It really is a pivotal part. And I learned about that when I learned about the energetic body through my yoga training. I pretty much loved all of my yoga teacher training, every aspect of it. But anatomy really lit me up. And that surprised me because I would have described myself at school as more of an English kind of, I like English, I like art, I like being creative. The science, math stuff, I was like, oh God, it really bored me at school. And so I was surprised because I'd seen the anatomy bit as sort of sciencey, and I thought, am I going to be any good at that? There was that story in me, but it absolutely lit me up, and I couldn't get enough of it, and I still can't. I'm absolutely fascinated with anatomy in general, physical anatomy and energetic anatomy. And so I started learning about the energetic body through the yoga system, so the nadis, the energy channels in your body, the chakra system, obviously. And it was when I really learned about the chakras, I was like, wow, the sacral chakra, and obviously this was all happening at the same time as me having this big poetic, creative awakening, and even learning about the energy that lies dormant beneath your root chakra, the Kundalini, and that if you start to awaken your energy body, you can release some of that Kundalini to rise up. And so who knows? I've never labeled my awakening as a Kundalini awakening, but some might view it like that. It could have been. I certainly felt a lot in my energy body through those deep meditations. So clearly a lot was being activated. But yes, I then started to really make the connection with the throat chakra and the sacral, and I was feeling a lot in those two chakras when I was meditating, a lot. And the most prevalent thing that would happen to me anytime I was in any kind of space, that if I was asked to share, and probably I remember the first time it happened to me would have been in Dylan's container. And I was in I think it was like a 2-week program, an inner work sort of journey. And we were all encouraged to speak up and take some space and say how we were feeling. And we were sort of checking in, and, it was all with context of his model of inner work. And I think the first time I decided to share and I unmuted, I mean, for me, that was like going back to primal sort of nervous system stuff, you know, like there was a tiger in the room about to eat me, and all I'd done was unmute. So it was pretty, my body was showing me where the wound was because of what happened to my body every single time I tried to speak. And my throat would like deeply ache with emotion, and then I'd get the emotion. And then initially I was really embarrassed about that. I was like, oh, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. And, you know, all I'm trying to do is say who I am. And Dylan held that space really well for me. And that was the connection. I started thinking, what is it with my voice? What is this? You know, there's been a lot of suppression, is what I tapped into. I was a very shy child, really. And I guess I was trying to be a version of myself to adapt and sort of survive, really, and fit in and just make sure everything was okay. So, you know, years and years of doing that and of creating behavior that's more adaptive rather than this is actually who I am and you guys need to know this. With my close family, I wasn't being my full authentic self because that was just what existed in me. So that was the work. And then I feel like the gift, you know, that came from wherever it came from, sacral chakra, of the poetry, almost, it sort of said you don't have a choice now because this is just happening to you. So it was like a gift. If I had a team of people behind me, they were like, let's put some poetry through her, and then she's going to have to use her voice. So slowly I started reciting and using my voice, and that was very scary at the start. But the more I did it, the more people said, your voice is really soothing. You've got a lovely voice. There's a lovely resonance to it. When I read your poems myself, it's not the same as when you read them. There's something about you reading them that's healing. So that was the journey, and that continues. And now I'm much better. Like my nervous system wasn't going crazy when you hit record. I've come a long way.
I was going to say, even if you were nervous, I would not have known. It's so fascinating that, like you said, it wasn't even a choice you had to. It was like your body was like, this is the medicine, let it out. You know, like rather than taking medicine in, it's going to come up and out and move through you. And I was thinking too, as you were saying that, because I'm people who are not watching the video, I'm moving my hands from my sacrum like up, out through the head. When I was learning somatic experiencing as a modality, they would say oftentimes when people are healing and releasing trauma through the somatic work, whether it's body work or talking to somebody, oftentimes they will have a sensation of heat rising up through the body. And I'm just thinking about how those early chakras are thought to develop as you move through life, they mature. That's my understanding of it anyway. And so it's this feeling of things getting stuck down there. If we get stuck developmentally, if we get traumatized early, the energy just kind of stays in these lower chakras. And then as we heal, it starts to move up and through. And I think it's no coincidence that so many of us have issues expressing ourselves. You know, you're not the only one, obviously, by a long shot, who has that, right? I'm the same way with expressing my voice. And actually, when I first started my professional Instagram and I started recording videos, I would record like 50,000 of them before the perfect 10-second clip came out of it. But it's a skill, it's a thing you practice. And the more you just let it move through you, the easier it becomes, because you're showing your body and your nervous system, not only am I safe, but it's actually well received, right? People are actually really seeing it and receiving it and loving it and benefiting from me expressing myself and putting myself into the world. And I keep feeling the urge to ask you to read some of your poetry. I don't know if it's short enough for you to do that as a way to maybe wrap things up. Are they too long for you to read any of it?
No, a lot of them are quite short and sweet. I mean, they're different. There are lots of different ones. It's interesting because this year has come more, speaking about the voice box as well, I've come more into singing. So it's really starting to develop on, and my poems are quite lyrical. You know, who knows? Again, I'm not attached to the outcome. It's just kind of like, oh, I just want to sing. And I think that's part of my healing, is singing myself home is how it feels. So lots of chanting mantra, and I'm having singing lessons. And so it's really interesting finding out about the voice box and learning the anatomy of what happens when you sing and the vagus nerve, and you're toning your vagus nerve, and you're using your deeper core muscles to support yourself when you're singing. So if I would imagine that my back muscles were possibly underutilized, and also my deeper core, I probably was pretty lost there, hence what, kind of manifested. But when I sing, there's this requirement that if you want to sing and hold the note for 4 bars or 7 bars, you've got to be really connected to your core. Otherwise, you just can't get the sound out.
Mm.
So that's just kind of like the latest update, which is amazing. It's been pretty magical as well. It's almost like I feel like it's another stage and I just want to sing, and it's not really for any, there's no outcome to it. I don't have any kind of plan like, oh, I'm going to be a singer or I'm going to be this. Like, I don't know. I just really like singing. I'm just like walking through the fields with my dog, just singing and
Wow.
singing in my car. And it's joyful. So I think it's reconnecting me to this fractured part of myself that did actually want to sing when I was younger in musicals and things like that. And doing that now, because nothing is linear, is it? Time isn't really a thing. So I will read you a poem, but what I'll do is I'll do it as a sort of oracle. So this poem will be, I don't know if it'll be for you or for you and all the listeners, but if you choose a number between 1 and 49, just intuitively.
37.
37. Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to make this into an oracle deck at some point,
Ooh, I love
because
that.
it would be so cool just to shuffle the cards and then you're like, this is your poem. At the moment, I didn't realize I would use it like that when I wrote it. So I've got the poems listed like that, and there's 7 in each chapter. So every time someone gives me a number, I'm going through the 7 times table.
Yeah.
You've chosen a poem called Hey You, which is quite apt. This book never lets me down. It's always right on point. Yeah. So this one is called Hey You. Hey you, I know your pain, that feeling inside, an empty void you can't fill, that nagging, dragging, tugging feeling that can't be fixed with a pill. You can call it what you like, label it all day long, but dig a little deeper down and you feel like you don't belong. You're not enough of that or too much of this, that you've never truly felt heard. You have nothing to offer, nothing to give. No one will hang off your word. All of these feelings, every one, can come down to a single thing, that you don't feel loved and you're looking outside when the truth is love is within.
Mm. That was
Yeah.
for me. I'm sure it was for so many others, but
Yeah.
that hits the nail on the head. Wow. I can see
Oh,
why whoever that was said that you reading it is so much more potent. I don't know. There's something about you delivering that. It's like your medicine. That's so beautiful.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was at a festival back in the summer and I did a workshop that was a guided meditation with some poetry weaved in whilst they were lying under blankets. And then when we sat up, we did an oracle. And honestly, I think there were about 9 people there. Every single person, when I did that oracle and they just chose a number, the poem that I read directly to them from my heart to each person was hugely impacted and touched. And yeah, so it never fails. And it's kind of beyond me, I feel quite humbled by it, really.
I think that's the sacredness of the illness, because it's saying not only are you not being you, but there's something that wants to come through you that
Yeah.
is not right now because of the way you're holding it in and the way you're, not in relationship with this part of you. And so I that's what I so deeply believe and have seen in so many people that I've talked to and worked with, that when they do go on this journey, eventually what comes forward is this medicine or this gift or whatever it is that is meant to be in the world starts to come through them. And and I love for you too, it's this is where it is now, and it's beautiful and it's medicinal and it's magical in the form that it's in now. And then already there's these additional ways that you're thinking and seeing and feeling that it could continue to evolve. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness. Claire, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time out of your schedule, for making all the notes and just making sure that your story is so well articulated and shared with us. I think it's just such a beautiful, an incredible journey and an inspiring journey. And it pulls in so many things that are so crucial for people to hear and to see in themselves, that you're not broken and that there's no right way to do this. You have to trust yourself, lean into those intuitions, trust the breadcrumbs, trust the things that don't make sense. It's guiding you somewhere. And I like to end my episodes with asking folks this question, which is, who is your illness inviting you to become, or who has it invited you to become? And I know you've already shared a lot of that, and we can already see kind of where it's leading you, but I'm curious how you would answer that question.
Yeah. So who has my illness invited me to become? I think a light, like a kind of guiding light. That's where that image comes from. And to understand the duality, I can see it in my background, the dark and the light, that, by me having the courage to face that darkness within me that was difficult, and it still is, it's raw. I'm still sitting with it today, and I'm still in that deep process. Having the courage to face that means that I can actually bring more light in and illuminate the way for other people. And again, I'm not attached to any outcome, but I do know that it's inviting me to become somebody who's brave enough to say, this is my story, this is how I have felt, and now I am leading the way for others to call themselves home, really, to come home to themselves and to use my voice, to come through the deep aching and the trembling and the nerves and the emotion that comes up, and to keep going, because really probably some of the biggest feedback I've had that has been consistent is that people find my voice healing, and that comes through when I hold a yoga class. I've always been the kind of teacher that it's important to me to honor the lineage of yoga, and so I always bring through some philosophy and some Dharma talk, however that comes through, or poetry. People around me are constantly saying, I find your voice really nurturing. Somebody once said to me after a retreat that I held, your voice is like a mother's hug. And I found that to be very poignant, because of my backstory involves a lot of separation from my mother, big separation. My mother didn't die, she is alive, but I never really spent much of my life with her. And that happened from a very early age, of this kind of coming backward and forward and chaos. So, yeah, being told that my voice is like a mother's hug is like this full circle moment, and like, okay, that's the medicine. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're mothering your inner child, and by doing so are becoming this archetypal mother for us through your poetry, through your words, through your presence. Even when you were telling your story, I was feeling so soothed just by listening to you speak.
I tend to attract people who feel the same way with their voice somehow, because I get a lot of clients saying to me, I feel really emotional around you and I don't really know why. And there's this unspoken thing. And I get people saying that being with me sometimes in that space with yoga, they feel really emotional. I always say, that's good. We don't have to analyze it, but I hope it's because you feel safe.
Yes. I was going to say, I think there's something about people who do the work and who are becoming safer in their own selves and feel safe in that more vulnerable space. I mean, that's co-regulation, right? We can sense it and we can feel it. And when someone can hold that space, creating that energy, that container, there's just something so, I think all any of us ever need is just to be deeply seen and to feel safe in that. And that's it, right? Like that's the medicine right there, is who you are is okay. I see you. I love you. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Like that's it. That's the healing. And however that space is held for us, it can be and is very emotional for us, because it's this feeling in our system of like, oh my God, that exists. And that's something I've never felt before.
Yeah.
It's so healing.
Overwhelming in its own way, in a good way. So maybe a more succinct one is, my illness is inviting me to become a safe sanctuary, a safe space, a safe kind of lighthouse for other people. You're safe with me. I think that at its most simple, that would be the invitation.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much, Claire. I am so appreciative of you coming on and sharing your story. And for folks who want to connect with you, your book is called In Light, and I will link that down below in the show notes. other places people can connect with you, or is the book the big one?
The book is a really good place to start. I am on Instagram as Claire_inlight. And then I'm also on YouTube, but I haven't really delved into that massively. But I am on YouTube as / I think I'm just Claire Hickson.
Okay, I'll get the link from you after this so that I can put it down below for folks, so we can be sure to, even if it's not developed yet, it'll be a place people can look at later on.
There are some nice meditations on there and some poetic recitals on there. And I have a website which is more to do with my yoga classes here in Oxfordshire, but there are some things that are online as well that you could access.
Perfect. Claire, such a pleasure. Thank you to Lizzie again for this connection. And thank you for spending your afternoon with us and sharing your story, sharing your medicine, sharing your medicinal voice with all of us. I'm so appreciative of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erin. And it's been a real honor for me. And actually it's been medicine. The whole process of just being on the podcast itself has been very medicinal for me. So I want to thank you for that and for being a safe space. I feel like I've got about 1 million questions I want to ask you about your work and where you're from and your story, but maybe we'll do that off the podcast another time.
I'd love to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you to your listeners as well. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. Thank you for another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. If you find this information inspirational and educational, please share it with those you think would benefit from this work. To take this work deeper yourself, check out our website, www.aurorasomatic.com, where you can explore our coaching, community, and course options. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel where new content is coming out all the time, intended to inspire, awaken, and help you deepen your relationship with yourself, your life, and your world. We'll see you next time.